For generations, Switzerland has been the world's answer to economic chaos. While empires collapsed and currencies burned, the Swiss model endured. A fortress economy built on precision, secrecy, and a currency so strong it functioned less like money and more like a store of civilization itself. The watches, the banks, the pharmaceutical giants, the mountain passes that shielded an entire nation from the turbulence of the world outside. Even today, when analysts want a reference point for what a stable, wealthy, disciplined economy looks like, they point here. But here is what the consensus is missing. Beneath the immaculate surface, behind the exchange rate data and the bank vaults and the pristine GDP figures, Switzerland's economic engine is losing power, quietly, systematically, in ways that don't make headlines until they're already irreversible. The currency that once symbolised Swiss dominance is now suffocating its own export industries. The secrecy premium that made Swiss banking untouchable has been dismantled, one treaty at a time. And the precision manufacturing and luxury goods that define the Swiss brand are being undercut by economies that move faster, cost less, and innovate harder. This is not a story about a country in crisis. It's a story about a country that doesn't yet know it should be. There was a time when Switzerland did not compete with the world, it simply operated above it. After the Second World War, while the industrial heartlands of Europe lay in rubble, and America scrambled to rebuild a shattered global order, Switzerland emerged untouched. Its factories were intact. Its banking system was flush with capital that had fled the continent for safety. Its neutrality, once a diplomatic convenience, had become an economic superpower in its own right. By the 1970s, Swiss watchmaking controlled over half of the global export value in the industry. Swiss banks held an estimated 40% of the world's offshore private wealth. Nestlé, Novartis, Roche, ABB. These were not simply successful companies. They were the institutional architecture of a national economic identity. Precision was the religion, quality was the export, discretion was the currency. The Swiss franc became the definitive safe haven asset, sought by central banks and billionaires alike whenever the world felt unstable, which it almost always did. The country's geographic isolation, once a limitation, had transformed into leverage, small, neutral, untouchable. The model worked because the world around it was volatile enough to make Switzerland's stability feel priceless. Investors, corporations, and foreign capital all paid a premium to exist inside the fortress. And Switzerland for decades simply collected that premium without questioning whether it would last forever. It did not ask that question loudly enough. The fortress held. The premium kept flowing. And then, on a single January morning in 2015, the Swiss National Bank made one decision that tore the foundation apart overnight. On the 15th of January 2015, the Swiss National Bank did something it had spent 3 years promising it would never do. It abandoned the cap that had held the Swiss franc at 1.20 against the euro since 2011. The announcement came with no warning, no transition period, no soft landing. Within minutes, the franc surged as much as 30% against the euro. Within hours, trading desks across Europe were in chaos. Several currency brokers collapsed entirely before the day was out. For Swiss exporters, it was a catastrophe delivered at the speed of a Reuters alert. A Zurich-based machine manufacturer that had priced its contracts in euros suddenly found its margins destroyed. A watchmaker in the Jura region saw its products become 30% more expensive to a German buyer before breakfast. The SNB's own models had concluded the cap was no longer sustainable, that the cost of defending it against relentless capital inflows had become too great. The logic was defensible. The timing was brutal. In the years following, Swiss export growth decelerated sharply. The watch industry, already under pressure from the rise of the Apple Watch and shifting consumer preferences, saw exports fall from a peak of around 21.8 billion francs in 2014 to 19.4 billion in 2016. SMEs with thin margins and euro-denominated revenue streams had no hedging infrastructure to absorb the shock. Many simply didn't survive it. The currency trap had been sprung, and the Swiss economy had walked straight into it. The franc shock exposed something the golden era had concealed. that Swiss economic dominance was never just about discipline and quality. It had been propped up, in part, by a currency arrangement that was quietly doing enormous work behind the scenes. With that arrangement gone, an older and deeper question resurfaced. What happens when luxury and precision are no longer enough? Switzerland built its modern identity on two pillars: making things so well that price became irrelevant, and making things so exclusive that scarcity became the product. For most of the 20th century, that formula was unbeatable. It no longer is. The Swiss watch industry remains symbolically powerful, but the numbers tell a more complicated story. The mid-range watch segment, historically the industry's volume driver, has been gutted by smartwatches. Apple alone now sells more watch units annually than the entire Swiss industry combined. The Swiss have retreated upmarket into the ultra-luxury tier, a sensible defensive move, but one that dramatically narrows the addressable market. In pharmaceuticals, the picture is more nuanced but no less pressured. Novartis and Roche remain global leaders, but both have faced sustained pressure from biosimilar competition, US drug pricing reform, and the sheer speed of biotech innovation emerging from American and Asian research clusters that operate with greater agility and lower overhead. Swiss precision engineering, once synonymous with irreplaceable quality, now competes against German, Japanese, and increasingly South Korean manufacturers who have closed the quality gap while offering significantly lower price points. The brand still carries weight. Swiss-made still commands a premium, but the premium is compressing, and in industries where margins are everything, compression is not a warning, it is a diagnosis. If you're finding this valuable, take 5 seconds and subscribe. This channel exists to give you the analysis that mainstream financial media never will. Now, let's keep going, because it gets more serious from here. Switzerland has long positioned its highly educated, multilingual, globally mobile workforce as one of its core competitive advantages. That positioning is now being undermined by the very success it created. The country consistently ranks among the most expensive places in the world to live and work. Zurich and Geneva regularly occupy the top spots in global cost of living indices. For a senior engineer or a young researcher, the salary is competitive in nominal terms. In real purchasing power terms, the calculation is increasingly unfavourable, particularly against cities like Amsterdam, Berlin, or Lisbon, where quality of life is high, and the cost of a decent apartment does not consume 60% of a graduate's income. The brain drain is not yet severe by conventional metrics, but the directional signal is clear. Switzerland's universities, ETH Zurich chief among them, consistently produce world-class graduates in engineering, data science, and life sciences. A growing share of those graduates is choosing to build their careers elsewhere, drawn by the equity culture of American tech companies or the lower cost of entry in the southern European startup ecosystems. Simultaneously, Switzerland faces a deepening demographic challenge. The country's fertility rate sits at approximately 1.5 births per woman, well below the 2.1 replacement threshold. The working age population is aging, the dependency ratio is rising, and Switzerland's historically restrictive immigration policies create a structural ceiling on the talent replenishment that most comparable economies rely on to stay competitive. The workforce that built the fortress is getting older. The generation that should replace it is leaving. The talent is leaving. The demographics are deteriorating. And just as that crisis compounds, Switzerland is confronting an even more uncomfortable truth. In the industries that will define the next 50 years of economic power, it is barely in the race. Switzerland's reputation for innovation is not unfounded. It files more patents per capita than almost any country on Earth. Its research institutions are genuinely world-class. But there is a category distinction that the headline innovation rankings consistently obscure. Switzerland is extraordinarily good at incremental innovation, refining existing processes, engineering marginal improvements, optimizing what already works. These are genuine and valuable capabilities. But the technological epoch now underway does not reward optimization. It rewards disruption. The platforms, ecosystems, and digital infrastructure that are restructuring global industry, cloud computing, artificial intelligence, semiconductor design, and large-scale consumer technology are being built primarily in the United States and increasingly in China, Taiwan, South Korea, and India. Switzerland has no meaningful presence in any of these categories. The country has no major homegrown technology platform with global scale. Its venture capital ecosystem, while growing, remains modest relative to its economic size. In 2023, Swiss tech startups raised approximately $3.8 billion in venture funding. Comparable economies like Sweden and Israel, both smaller in population, significantly outperform Switzerland in VC intensity relative to GDP. The deeper problem is cultural. Swiss corporate governance is conservative. Risk appetite is low. The startup ecosystem lacks the density of failure-tolerant capital that produces breakthrough companies. The country is extraordinarily good at the economy of yesterday. The question is whether it can build the economy of tomorrow before yesterday runs out of road. The innovation gap is widening, and as if that were not enough, the very feature that made Switzerland a magnet for the world's wealth for over a century is quietly being legislated out of existence. Swiss banking secrecy was not simply a policy, it was a geopolitical instrument. Codified in the Banking Act of 1934, the law made it a criminal offence for Swiss banks to disclose client information to foreign authorities. For decades, this framework attracted capital from every corner of the planet. Political instability in Latin America, tax avoidance in Western Europe, sanctions evasion in the Middle East. Switzerland did not ask where the money came from. It simply kept it safe and kept it quiet. That model is now functionally dead. Under sustained pressure from the OECD and the G20, Switzerland signed onto the Common Reporting Standard in 2017, committing to the automatic exchange of financial account information with over 100 participating jurisdictions. The era of banking secrecy as a competitive differentiator did not end with a dramatic confrontation. It ended with a series of bureaucratic agreements that most people never read. The consequences are structural. The offshore wealth premium that once flowed almost automatically into Swiss institutions is now distributed across Singapore, Dubai, the Cayman Islands, and Luxembourg, jurisdictions that offer legal confidentiality within a more globally accepted compliance framework. Switzerland still manages an estimated $2.2 trillion in offshore private wealth, maintaining its position as the world's largest offshore financial centre. But its market share is eroding, and the institutional identity built around secrecy has no clear successor. The vault is open, the lock is broken, and the clients know it. In 2023, LVMH reported revenues of €86 billion. Richemont, the Swiss luxury conglomerate and parent company of Cartier and IWC, reported revenues of approximately €20 billion. The comparison is instructive, not because size alone determines competitive position, but because it illustrates the gravitational shift underway in the industries Switzerland has historically dominated. The French luxury model is built on scale, platform thinking, and aggressive global distribution. The Swiss model is built on craft, scarcity, and heritage. Both worked well when the global luxury consumer was concentrated in Europe and North America. The emerging luxury consumer is in China, Southeast Asia, and the Gulf, and these consumers increasingly respond to brand ecosystems, digital storytelling, and experiential retail in ways that Swiss manufacturers have been slow to operationalize. In advanced manufacturing, Swiss precision engineering is facing intensifying competition from South Korean and Taiwanese firms that have matched Swiss quality standards in several sectors while operating at a structural cost advantage. In finance, Singapore and Dubai have emerged as fully capable alternatives for the high net worth clients and institutional mandates that once defaulted to Zurich and Geneva. The infrastructure is there, the regulatory environment is sophisticated, and the time zones are better suited for the capital flows that now define global wealth management. Switzerland is not losing because it is doing things badly. It is losing because its competitors are doing things better, faster, and at scale. That is a more difficult problem to solve. The competitors are stronger than ever. The old advantages are eroding on every front. And through all of it, Switzerland has maintained one defining posture: neutrality. But in a world that is increasingly forcing every nation to choose sides, that neutrality is no longer free. Switzerland's neutrality has survived wars, ideological confrontations, and the entire arc of 20th century geopolitics. It is a founding principle, a legal status, and a national identity compressed into a single word. But the economic cost of that neutrality in the current global environment is rising in ways that are difficult to quantify and impossible to ignore. The country's non-membership in the European Union has long been managed through a complex web of bilateral agreements with Brussels, over 120 of them. That framework is under severe strain. Negotiations over a new institutional agreement with the EU collapsed in 2021, and the resulting uncertainty has complicated Swiss access to EU research programmes, digital markets, and regulatory alignment. In 2022, Switzerland was excluded from Horizon Europe, the EU's flagship research and innovation programme, depriving its universities of collaborative funding and network access that are structurally important to maintaining scientific competitiveness. Geopolitically, the war in Ukraine forced Switzerland into an uncomfortable position. Its tradition of neutrality restricted the speed and scope of its sanctions alignment with Western allies, drawing sharp criticism from EU partners and raising questions about whether Swiss financial infrastructure was being used to soften the impact of sanctions on Russian assets. The world is reorganising along economic and political blocks. Supply chains are being reshored, trade relationships are being subordinated to strategic alignment. In that environment, a country that insists on standing between every side is increasingly finding itself welcome nowhere in particular. Neutrality was once a premium product. It is becoming a liability. Switzerland is not finished. That must be stated clearly and without ambiguity. The fundamentals that made it extraordinary do not vanish overnight. The institutional quality, the rule of law, the research infrastructure, and the accumulated capital remain genuine and significant advantages. No serious analysis ends with a prediction of Swiss collapse. But the question was never about collapse. It was about relevance. The Swiss economic model was engineered for a world defined by capital mobility, manufacturing precision, and the premium placed on stability and discretion. That world is being replaced by one defined by digital scale, geopolitical alignment, and the speed of technological disruption. The transition is not hypothetical. It is already underway. Switzerland faces a fundamental choice, and it is not primarily a policy choice. It is a cultural one. The conservatism, the risk aversion, the deep institutional preference for protecting what exists over building what is next. These are not bugs in the Swiss system. They are features. But features engineered for one era can become structural weaknesses in another. The countries that will define the next phase of global economic power are the ones willing to be uncomfortable, to disrupt their own industries before someone else does, to build in public, fail quickly, and iterate without shame. Switzerland has every resource required to make that transition. The talent, the capital, the institutional credibility. What remains uncertain is whether the will exists to use them before the window closes. The Alpine fortress is still standing. The question is whether anyone inside it is building something new or simply maintaining the walls.